The Bank of England has warned that the British economy is heading for an unprecedented recession. It says the economy is on course for the sharpest annual contraction for 300 years, with the coronavirus epidemic dramatically reducing jobs and incomes. The Governor of the Bank of England said the economy is expected to contract by 14%. That's more than double what happened during the Great Crash of 2008. The unemployment rate could double to 9%, though the bank thinks the economy will bounce back next year. Today, the death toll from coronavirus rose again. 30,615 people have lost their lives in the past 8 weeks. More on that and the lockdown in a moment. But first, here's our economics editor, Faisal Islam.
At East Midlands Airport, there may be no passenger planes right now, but cargo carries on. The pandemic means new patterns in the goods being traded back and forth as the world's major economies face recession.
Coronavirus per se hasn't taken shipments out of our network, but quarantine and lockdown and people working at home and factories being closed has. I can't predict the future, but what I would say is that business heals.
And it will have to be resilient. The Bank of England today is sketching out that the pandemic and the shutdown have plunged the UK economy into the sharpest downturn in history, a far worse start to a recession than the financial crisis over a decade ago, than any recession ever, but with the hope of a rapid rebound.
Morning, Governor.
So quite different in shape to that last recession, says the Governor of the Bank of England.
Well, I think it is unprecedented in the history of this institution. I would say it's different in two respects. It's a much sharper downturn. So the initial fall is much more pronounced because the economy literally went into shutdown very quickly. The recovery is actually much faster because we believe that, with the right measures in place from the public health side and the fact that it's supported by the very sensible things that the government has done, that economic activity can resume much more quickly.
Given the uncertainty, this is not a formal forecast. There may be more than a glint of optimism here. Never in the history of this institution have we seen it anticipate a recession quite so sharp. The hope is that the rebound will be almost as sharp into next year, but that is as much a matter for doctors and politicians as economists. But despite that economic damage, there's no pressure here for an instantaneous lifting of the lockdown. A second wave of the pandemic would not just be deadly, it would imperil the much hoped for economic rebound. A recession this sharp hits workers hard.
As you're aware, there's not really much job opportunity at the moment.
Jamal from Hertfordshire, just one example of how tough it is to find a job after losing his at an online retailer.
I've been applying for pretty much anywhere that I qualify for. Salary doesn't really matter. So previously, the wage I was on wasn't too bad, but I've been applying for minimum wage jobs.
Indeed, the Bank of England sees unemployment more than doubling, up 1.5 million to rates not seen since the mid-1990s and taking 2 years to then fall back. People at home, they see that chart, it looks quite scary.
The chart reflects the reality that we've been in now for, since March. Where I think they should be reassured is that I can tell you that both the government and the Bank of England have put in place a very big package of measures, and we will go on utterly focused on that.
The wheels of the world economy are still turning, but they happen to be turning more slowly than we've seen in our lifetimes as a result of this pandemic crisis. The question is whether some of the changes we're seeing will last far longer, perhaps be permanent. It may yet take some time to adjust to this new normal for the economy.
And Faisal joins me now. And this idea that the economy could bounce back next year is seen by as optimistic by some.
Yes, I think we're using the word sharpest to describe this recession because it describes just how rapid the speed of the fall is at the beginning. And it doesn't necessarily mean it will be prolonged and deep. We just don't know at the moment. One of the reasons that the Bank of England in its report and in the interview the Governor gave with me for a rapid bounce back is the likes of the extraordinary government action, paying the wages for millions of workers. They specifically said that that was one of the reasons, and that's quite interesting because it's due to start to be unwound by the end of next month. And then if you take a step back, how can it be that you have this sort of grim and unprecedented fall, and at the same time people saying, well, it's optimistic? Well, what we've had so far is the fall, and it's obvious around us. Closed restaurants, closed shopping, closed everything. What goes from now on is still up for grabs. And it's not just dependent on what happens in shopping centres or in factories or on market trading floors. It's probably as dependent on what happens in government and in our laboratories where the scientists find a vaccine, for example.
Faisal Islam, thank you. As the Prime Minister prepares to address the nation on Sunday, outlining the next stages of lockdown and any plans to ease it, he says the government will advance with maximum caution. Legally, the restrictions have been extended for another 3 weeks, but behind the scenes, the governments of the UK nations are all looking at what comes next. And on this, there could be some divergence. In Scotland, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says she will not be pressured into acting too early. It was a matter of life and death, as she put it. Here's our political editor, Laura Kunsberg.
Peering into the new normal. A restaurant ready for a day of deliveries instead of prepping for a busy Thursday night. The Prime Minister's stay-at-home message is on the way out, but there won't be customers at these chairs and tables soon.
We've had to shut down 15 restaurants, and so it's had a massive impact on us. As of yesterday, we've opened 3 restaurants to just do takeaway, and it's just a massive learning curve. We are extremely worried, but we're just trying to keep positive.
But with the economy turning so negative, we've had glimpses of Downing Street's plan to start easing some restrictions very gradually from Monday. The government's keen to move on because cases have been falling and the crucial infection rate, the R number, is under 1, the level where it could spread out of control.
The R level, which signifies the rate of infection, is now between 0.5 and 0.9. The virus is not beaten yet. It remains deadly and infectious.
Until now, Westminster and the other national governments have been more or less in step. But listen to the First Minister of Scotland, plainly unhappy at the way Number 10 might plan to move.
I particularly strongly believe that for us to drop the clear, well-understood stay-at-home message right now could be a potentially catastrophic mistake. It's not an exaggeration to say that the decisions we take now are a matter of life and death.
You stood there at that same lectern time after time and said that it would be wrong to talk about lifting any kind of restrictions because you might give people the wrong impression. Yet isn't that exactly what the government risks doing now?
There's no change in the rules today. What the Prime Minister will do is set out on Sunday a roadmap that can look to the future and explain what steps will be taken at what moment in time and, critically, the evidence that will back it up.
But how certain can the path be ahead when the rate of infection could be going up because of what's happening in care homes?
Right, that R has probably gone up just a little bit from his last estimates, and that is driven by the epidemic in care homes, he would say, and I would not demur from that.
Downing Street's promised to keep the opposition in the loop. They want precision on what's going on.
There needs to be absolute clarity that we must all follow the rules until lockdown is lifted. It doesn't mean we can't discuss what comes next, but we've got to follow those rules.
No surprise there's tension. Governments face the hardest of decisions. None as fraught as when schools should welcome more than just the kids of key workers. Maybe as soon as next month in England, but later elsewhere.
We normally would be able to accommodate about 30 students. We'll be splitting classes into about 15.
This London secondary normally rings with the sound of 1,200 pupils.
One student at that desk. Does that actually represent 2 metres?
Now buying disinfectant, dividing up classrooms, just as important as double maths.
Some parents won't have confidence in sending their children in, and I think it's incumbent on us to do what we can, all school leaders, to make sure that the environment is as safe and secure as it possibly can be.
If only the changes to our lives would be as simple as bikes instead of footballs in the playground. Coronavirus makes strange and uncertain the shape of things to come. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.